Can London schools be transformed from failures to success? Watch Could Do Better, the London programme special, tonight on ITV after news at 10.
She'll leave the Commons but wants a platform in the Lords. A tear as the Iron Lady recalls losing power. His praise is generous, but the differences remain. After a day of fighting in Yugoslavia, a ceasefire holds. And guilty of losing secrets, but he keeps his job. Good evening. Mrs. Thatcher will leave the House of Commons at the next election. She said the time was right to announce that she wouldn't contest her seat in Finchley again. She said she would be freer to say what she felt about her differences with government policy, without people thinking she was waiting in the wings to return to number 10. In an exclusive interview with our political editor Michael Brunson, Mrs. Thatcher gave what she called more than a little hint that she wanted a seat in the House of Lords. And during the interview, Mrs. Thatcher cried when she talked about how last November she told her cabinet she was going to stand down as Prime Minister.
Mrs. Thatcher, you say in your statement you've taken this decision after the deepest consideration, and you also say that some friends have urged a different course of action. What has led you finally to decide that it's time to step down?
Because it was obviously a time for decision. If my constituency had to choose someone else to fight, they had to have sufficient time in which to do it. If I fought on, it would be almost certain that I'd be only fighting on for one more term, and that would mean that I wouldn't have kind of the full authority that I would wish to have. And also, I think people are beginning to realize that I have to do quite a lot on the international scene, because there's a great deal to be done and one's advice is sought. And I thought, therefore, that one's constituents might feel that I hadn't as much time for them as I should have had.
Has there been any pressure at all from number 10 or from Mr. Major, in the sense that almost unwittingly, perhaps, some people might have seen you as a backseat driver?
None whatsoever. Not in any way. I've spoken to him several times, or he's spoken to me about political matters. We've talked together, so I put it that way. I have, as you know, tried to keep quiet on many, many things because I didn't want to make it difficult for him. He has to develop his own style. We all had to do that. And I feel now that, as it will be known that I'm not standing again, I can be freer to say things, because people will know that I'm not waiting in the wings. They will realize that there's nothing like that about it.
Well, it's quite clear that you're going to speak out then in the future on Europe. That is something you feel absolutely passionately about. Now, can I put this to you, that all the signs are that some kind of deal on monetary union and perhaps on other things looks in prospect at Maastricht?
A single currency is a move to a political union, because that way you've got control of the economy. That's why I am absolutely against it.
But could you, for example, live with something like the Delors Compromise,
No.
which in its very... You could not.
The Delors Compromise was that there should be a single currency in the Treaty of Rome to which we should sign up. I do not believe in that.
And Britain would sign up perhaps later, a long way down the road.
That, I'm afraid, is trying to get us there step by step, little by little. That has often been done in the community. I think that is wrong. If other people wish to become closer together with a single currency, they're perfectly entitled to do so. Luxembourg is already very close to the Belgian franc. Indeed, it's the Belgian franc that dominates Luxembourg. The Dutch guilder is already very close to the Deutschmark. You don't have to try to pour 12 very different nations into the same shaped pigeonhole.
You also said in Parliament the other day, if you ask a straight question, you will give a straight answer. So may I put what is a straight question, and I don't mean to be rude when I put it, but you will have seen the press reports that you are, quote, not keen on Mr. Major, that you think that he's letting go of Thatcherism a bit too quickly, that the poll tax, for example, might have gone too quickly. What's your answer to those reports?
I supported John Major vigorously. He has been a Chancellor of the Exchequer. I recommended him as a Chancellor of the Exchequer to be appointed by Her Majesty the Queen. And I knew that he knew the fundamental heart of economics and of monetary matters. I think that is very important, and I supported him vigorously. He was my choice of candidate. Of course he does some things differently. Anyone would going into that job. Of course he does. And the community charge was one of the things he did differently. As a matter of fact, I thought it could have been left as it was if more government money or taxpayers' money was coming in. Most of the difficulties would have gone, and we would have kept the fundamental principle that everyone, but everyone, unless they're too poor, who benefits from local authority services, and that is everyone, ought also to pay something towards local authority services locally.
Mrs. Thatcher, this is the first time you've spoken to British television since your resignation, so I wonder, because we haven't heard, as it were, your version of events and your side of the story. Well, could I just, first of all, ask you to recall what must have been a very difficult meeting of the Cabinet?
Yes, of course it was. Of course it was. You don't take a decision like that without it being difficult, without heartbreak. Heartbreak there may have been, but it was the right decision.
But you had to get through it. Bernard Ingham, in his memoirs, has said that it was a traumatic experience. Those are his words.
Yes, it was. And it would have been very strange if it hadn't been. But we got through it.
In fact, you broke down.
We got through the House.
You broke down during that Cabinet, didn't you?
Yes, but I carried on.
And then the House.
By that time, I was back fighting fit, as you saw.
Just before that, though, the image that people will perhaps remember, you said the Cabinet was extremely difficult. And then you had to come out into Downing Street, and you had to face the cameras. Mm-hmm. In effect, you had to face the world. Mm-hmm. You had to come and make what was perhaps the statement of your life. And then I see that, you know, we notice now that it's affecting you now, and it must have been
yes,
the
it's
most
not affecting
difficult.
my voice now. It's not affecting my voice. You're thinking back to traumatic things. But I managed to get through them. I managed to get through the television. I managed to get through the Cabinet, again because there was something else to do. I had to get on to people, and I must say this, but Douglas Hurd and John Major said, if you wish to go on, we will propose you and second you again. And that was marvellous. That was marvellous. And then one had to get through Cabinet, and one or two people wanted to leave because they too, of course, wanted to make provision for their own candidature. Quite right. Quite right. But by that time, I had other things to do, and so I got on with them.
Are you going to miss the House?
I think you always miss something that's been part of your life for so long, 32 years. You miss the debate, you miss the companionship, and whether from one house or another, I shall be there. I shall be there.
That sounds like a little hint that you might be prepared to go to the House of Lords.
It's more than a little hint. It's not entirely in my gift.
I understand that, but you'd be perfectly happy if it was suggested to you to take your seat in the House of Lords.
I think I would like to have a forum in Parliament, and that's the only other one.
Mr. Major in Luxembourg for the European Summit said he was sure that Mrs. Thatcher's decision didn't mean the end of her contribution to political life. He said she would go down in history as one of the great prime ministers.
John Major knew about a year ago that Mrs. Thatcher was seriously considering standing down, but it wasn't until yesterday that his predecessor made the final decision, and even to the last some MPs were telling her not to go, and it wasn't until this morning that Mrs. Thatcher sent him a message in Luxembourg confirming that she'd decided to go.
Mrs. Thatcher is a very formidable politician. She has always spoken her mind. She's been right to speak her mind. She will continue to do so. I believe that Mrs. Thatcher has made it clear and will continue to make it clear that she will give the Conservative Party her full support. There's no doubt about that. She's spent the whole of her life fighting for Conservative principles. She'll go on doing that.
Among the Cabinet, there was the belief that Mrs. Thatcher's departure would make things easier for Mr. Major.
She obviously steps back one pace, leaving him in the decisive role of governing the country, and I think it'll be clearer that she is supporting that successor and accepts that her old authority has gone to him.
Neil Kinnock was sure that he knew the true reason